Tough Talking Thursday. This is Focus on Liberia, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In today's edition of Tough Talking Thursday, we're ready to talk tough, and that's why we have our man T. Michaels introduce the show by the song "I Don't Need Your Tabata." So there's no Tabata tonight, and we're going to get right into it. Our topic: where would the change come from? You've heard about change all the time. Almost every political grouping is bringing change. Every pressure group talks about change. But what does change look like? And where will it come from? In this current arrangement, will the change come from the CDC government led by President Weah or the George Weah administration? Will the change come from the opposition CPP? Or will the change come from the legislature, the judiciary, or will it come from the people? With me to discuss this, I have the unabashed, unapologetic Sedition, who is also the host of Focus on Liberia Show on Point, Mr. Jerome Gaiman. Mr. Gaiman, welcome for the first time on Tough Talking Thursday.
Thank you very much. And it's an honor to be in your midst with some great Liberians. We look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Also joining us from the city of Philadelphia is our brother, all the way from, originally from Kanweaken at WAPLO Institute, Mr. Mohammed Sharif. Mr. Sharif, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Right. How is WAPLO?
Well, you know what? Say shout out to those from WAPLO Institute who may be watching or who will be watching later on. This is one of your alumni, and all I'm trying to do in the next few months and years is to highlight that great institution and put it on the map.
Also joining us, thank you, Mr. Sharif. Joining us from Monrovia is our organizational development and change management expert, Madam Wade Power. Wade, welcome to Focus on Liberia Tough Talking Thursday.
Thank you very much, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we want to welcome you for the second time on Tough Talking Thursday, where we talk tough. We want to welcome all viewers from across the globe. We all heard about change, and all the time there's change, there's change, there is change. So in tonight's discussion, we're going to be talking about where will this change come from? Who's going to be the champion of this change? Who's going to lead us to the promised land when it comes to change? I want to go around the room by saying, first of all, before we talk about change, what is change and how does change look like? Mr. Sharif.
Oh, again, I want to thank you for this very important discussion. So when you talk about change, it's the transformation of business as usual. Right now, when you look at Liberia, it is not a hyperbole to say that the country is in a precipitous decline. So what needs to happen, right? So there has to be a change. It cannot be what we used to do before. So that's one set of change. Another set of change is to look what didn't work and institute measures to make it work. So if Liberia in this example is a vehicle that's going at 50 miles per hour, this president needs to go at 100 miles per hour. And it's not just the president. You also have the collective opposition who have the share of of tasks that they need to make sure to bring change to Liberia. You also have the people themselves who also have to make sure that they're voting right. So we'll get into all of that. And then finally, besides the executive, you also have the judiciary and you have the legislature. So all of these different actors are responsible for change. However, there is a central actor in all of this that we're going to discuss a little later on.
Thank you. Mr. Gaiman, what does change look like to you in the case of Liberia?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to discuss what change looks like and what I perceive to be a real change. I am a student of that era. We joined the POW movement in 1978 when I was at the Bassa High School. And I can tell you from my standpoint in my growing up, what Liberia looks like or looked like in the 60s and 70s when we became of age, and the 90s, the 80s, the 90s, and now, based on our history and where we have come and how far we have come, I can tell you that change has arrived. I can juxtapose the legislative body of the 70s and the 60s. I can juxtapose the leadership of the 2000 to 2017, and you can juxtapose that with the legislature now that we have and the leadership in the country. And there is a clear difference. It is so obvious, it is so clear, like night and day. If you look at the Speaker of the House before the coup, I think it was Richard A. Henry. When you look at the Speaker now, you look at Mr. Chamber, and you go forth and compare. You look at the President in the 70s, the William R. Talbot, from the very old order. You look at the President now, Honorable President George Weah, a very young, energetic from the grassroots. So if you say change, when we're talking about change, change is here. And then let's now talk about the policy of the George Weah pro-poor agenda. The first pillar of that pro-poor is power to the people. We have to give power to the people. And you saw this going election 2020, what happened? The people decided across the country what they want to do. So change is here, and CDC is that vehicle for the change.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jerome. Let me go to Wade. Wade, what has changed to you?
I think I'm going to try to answer that question more generally as opposed to what change is to me. When we're looking at change on a national level, we must understand that the first thing that needs to happen is to determine what the problem is. And then in determining what the problem is, you start to look for what the source of the problem is. But you first have to determine what the problems are, right? Unfortunately, in our country, we have over the years equated change to more of a physical change as opposed to a true transformative change, right? And so when we look at change, we look at the physical attributes of it. Maybe it's in a road, maybe it's in a building, maybe it's in markets and whatnot, right? One of the things that we have not, and we continue to not do when looking at change, is to properly define what change means for the country. The country changes every day. People change every day. So we can't just throw this word change around. Instead, what we need to start doing is defining what that change means for us in as much as it relates to development, in as much as it relates to people development, country development, national development, infrastructure development. And not only what it means or what it looks like, we also have to start talking about what is going to take to accomplish that transformative change. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen because you put it in a policy document. It's not going to happen because you speak it. It's going to happen by action. And what we have failed to see over the years is that Liberia is one of the countries that's blessed with some of the best laws on the books. We are blessed with some of the most outstanding policy documents, very well written. But unfortunately, they've been stuck, just in that form, right? It's a bunch of writing on paper, and there's no action to back it up. So first, as a nation, we need to figure out or determine what change looks like that is actually going to be national development change and transformation.
Mr. Gilman, you describe change as almost like personal change. You talk about Richard Henry, you talk about President Weah, you talk about the speaker and all that. Does change mean people? And
obviously, my sister just talked about policy. Policies are written by people and they are implemented by people. So personalities do count. Personalities do count when it comes to change. She talked about transformative change. When we talk about transformative change, it also entails personality and generational change. For instance, what my father looked at as change definitely does not sound similar to what I looked at as change. When I was growing up, women like my sister here, they were relegated to not even second class, but third class citizens. Now today, I'm seeing women all over the place. They have a voice of their own. So yes, change entails people. So we cannot relegate that to the dustbin of politics.
Mr. Sharif, Mr. Gima is saying we have arrived. What's your take?
Yes, we have arrived in the wrong direction. So instead of accelerating, right, Liberia is decelerating sadly, right before our very eyes. So you have, just because we have a national election that produced, um, you know, should I say, a native uh, president, right? And this is a discussion that's too heavy for me, right? But I gotta get in that describe that context. So if you talk about a native president has been elected, a native vice president has been elected, and describe that as a change, that to me is not enough. It's not enough just to have a native dominated legislature, a native dominated judiciary, a native dominated executive branch, and so on and so forth. That is not enough for me. Um, right now in Monrovia, the country is running out of space to admit patients who are devastated with, the the new variant of the COVID-19 virus. This is happening before this is happening on the watch of a so-called native president. The hospitals are full. There are no beds. People are dying in their vehicles and their homes for lack of care. So is this the change that we want? Is this the change that the 1980 coup, or maybe a revolution, as some will call it, is this the change that the 1980 coup plotters designed? Is this the cool? Is this the change that Bacchus Matthews envisaged? If this was the change that Mr. Bacchus Matthews and others envisaged for Liberia, then I have to tell you that there was then no need for this kind of change, because the country has completely, and I say completely, decelerated in the wrong direction.
Thank you. Well, you raised a very important point that we have to also take into account what it's going to take for this change to take place. What do you think it's going to take?
It's going to take a lot. And I think the sooner our leaders start being honest with citizens about what change requires, the better off we'll be. Putting policies, putting plans on a piece of paper, it will remain pipe dreams until we start to look at it from the standpoint of implementation, right? One of the things that we have to start doing and change on a national level, right? If we're looking at true transformative changes, if we have to start driving changes that is based on problems that people care about. Because when people care about a problem, then they're motivated to solve that problem, right? So when we're looking at the things that need to happen in our country and the change that we're looking for, are we looking at things that the average Liberian or the larger population of Liberians, are we looking at things that they are interested in, that they feel need to be changed? Once again, I'm not interested in change that just involves the change of the players, because that gets us nowhere. You take Peter and put Paul there, it makes no difference unless Paul is actually better than Peter and Paul is actually a better leader than Peter and able to drive the change that we have. We need champions, right? When we're talking about champions, and one of the mistakes that Liberians, I think the greatest mistakes that Liberians have made and continue to make, is that they have mortgaged the power that they have, right? Because now we live in a society where the president of the country is the only one that is looked at when it comes to doing anything good, right? But at the end of the day, there's no single individual that is walking this earth that is going to be able to bring about change. However, the leader must always be the champion. What do I mean by that? The leader has to be the one that has the vision. The leader has to be the one that has the capability and the capacity to say to the Liberian people, this is the direction that we're going in. This is how we're going to do it. And I need all hands on deck. And when I say all hands on deck, I mean all hands on deck. as opposed to having a situation where you're saying that only certain people are allowed to come and solve Liberia's problem, right? Look at it from the standpoint of any organization. You have an organization, you run an organization. The organization is in shambles, right? And you say, you know what, we need to change. We need to do things a different way. Aha, the president of the organization comes up and says, we need to do X, Y, Z. But you're in the business department, you're not allowed to participate. We want here, nothing for you. Only the people in accounting will listen to, right? For X, Y, Z reason. How do you think that change is going to come about? Everybody within a system has a role that needs to be played when you're talking about change. And as long as people are prevented from playing that role, true transformative change never occurs. So change is not about changing people or changing personalities. It's absolutely not about that.
Thank you. And that leads us to our next step, which is in the case of this change, where will it come from? And I have for you some options here. Will this change come from Judge Weah administration? And Mr. Gamey, I'm not trying to dismiss what you said, that change is already here. I think whatever change, we still need improvement, right? We can all agree on that.
Well, I mean, absolutely. This is why government is continuity, and my sister talked about it. And one of the things that those of us who have been in the vanguard for this long have been talking about, but no one wants to listen because it is disarming them, is that some of us from the 80s and the 90s, we have talked about this unitary government that Liberia has that makes the president the supreme power like a god. We need to disrobe that system and come up with some quasi-federal system that empowers the people. When Baka Matthew was speaking, listen, when Baka Matthew was speaking to us as young folks, he said, if I don't accomplish anything, I just need multi-party democracy where we can have our choices. And then we will build on that.
Right. Thank you. Let me I will come to you, for that, because so what, in essence, the premise I'm trying to lay here is you also believe that we are not there yet. Change is still needed because you talk about decentralization or some quasi-federal system. So change is not all here. We need change, right?
Obviously.
Right.
Change in itself is progressive.
All right.
It's not constant.
Great. So in that case, the question for tonight is, where will this change come from? Is it the Judge Weah administration? Is it the opposition CPP? Is it our lawmakers, the courts, or the people? Let me start with you, Wade. You started this discussion already. Where will the change come from?
It comes from all of the above. There is no one group that you've listed there that is not a part of the change. In order for us to truly have change, everybody plays a role. And I want to go back to what I said in the beginning. First, define what the problems are, and then you start to define how you solve the problem. And in defining how you solve the problem, you now identify the various roles that everybody plays in solving the problem, right? So there's no change, positive transformative change that can occur in Liberia without actions from each one of those groups. It's not going to happen.
Right. But who's going to lead it?
It has to be the current administration. That's the champion. That is why we elect a president. And that is why we hope that the president appoints a cabinet minister or cabinet ministers that are able to help carry out whatever vision they have for the country. That is why we elect the legislators and hope that the legislators will actually go in those houses, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, that they will actually go in those houses and do the work of the people. But unfortunately, we found ourselves for far too long in the positions where this is not occurring. And that is why you're not seeing things happen that needs to happen. Once again, I've had an opportunity to read, through tons of the various change strategy documents that the government has come up with, both from the previous administration and this administration. These are all good documents. But you're left with asking yourself the question, well, if we have such beautiful documents, why are we not implementing?
Yeah. And so, Mr. Gilman, where
Yes.
should this change come from? Who should be driving it?
Well, I think the sister has a point. The commander in chief has, as the head of state and the standard bearer and the torch bearer of the various branches that she named. I think he has that responsibility to do those things. And one of the things that some of us are concerned about with this administration, of which I am a part, I love, and I share, is the fact that when you are in leadership, implementation is very, very key. Okay, and holding people accountable to carry out those plans to the T is an executive experience and a mandate and a requirement, and it should have nothing to do with friends. It should have nothing to do with relatives. It should have nothing to do with partisanship. It has to do with performance review, and this is where I am having the issue with my own president. We have to have performance review, whether it's quarterly or annually, and those who are just not performing have to go no matter where they come from. This thing about we have to share government, people from the different party have to come, that's to me, it's a useless argument. We are looking for performance. If you cannot perform, the performance review shows who are doing what and who's not doing that. Those people just have to go. That's what the leadership is all about. But then again, I'm an executive. I run stuff from the private sector. I do things differently. In the political realm, it's a little different, so I understand where they come from. But from my point, where this office I'm in, I run a large organization, and all my department is run based on performance review.
Mr. Mohammed Sharif, the question is who should drive this change? Key word there is should. What's your take?
The critical driver of this change of which we speak has to be the president. The president of Liberia is an executive person. This did not start with Mr. Weah. This, goes back decades. I would say from the founding of the Liberian nation state. You've had, the executive presidency ever since the country was founded. And so it would take the courage of a president to break that cycle, to break that that executive presidency. So, for example, you have the three branches of government under the Constitution are supposed to be equal, right? But in reality, they are not equal. So, why it is constitutionally acceptable, and we talk about this all the time, that there are three branches of government. The president is the most powerful individual in the country. And so the president of Liberia, George Weah, the current president, has to take the lead in breaking, that sort of dependency on the executive. So what you had recently was, the removal of a Supreme Court justice, of a Supreme Court justice at the behest of the president of the country. And this did not start with George Weah. You had Chair Chipo, who was impeached by Samuel Doe because Chair Chipo was trying to do something right. So you have people like Chair Chipo who was trying to maintain the independence of the judiciary. Well, you see what happened to him. He could not get a job after that. And Kabina Jana, he's probably done until, the next administration comes around. So this is the kind of thing that, others are, who are in the executive, who are in the legislature, who are in the judiciary, they don't want to go around anything that has to do with, getting on the president's nerves, so to speak. Because
Mr. Sharif, the president is being put in that position by the people. Okay, so why are you not putting the burden on the people who elect these leaders and who have the right to recall their leaders, to choose leaders, put them in power, and take power away from them? So if the people are not doing that, and we've seen in other places where change starts from the bottom, why is it not people?
Listen, change in Liberia, unfortunately, is not going to necessarily start from the bottom up. It has to trickle down. And so you have a country like Liberia that is maybe, moderately 70% electricity rate. And, unemployment is much more higher than that. So when you amalgamate all of that, that tells you how, the people are going to react. You and I are here in the United States. We, financially, we are independent. So the government cannot tell us what to do. We can go out there and vote for whoever we want to vote for. We're not dependent on the government.
Right.
We can go out 4 years from now and vote for the Republicans.
Right.
Although, that's something I'm sure you're going to do or I'm going to do. Right.
Right.
So in Liberia, you do not have that. Everybody is dependent on the public sector. So therefore, you have a bloated public sector. If you are the Minister of Finance, right?
And that's
You're
where
going to
sacrifice is supposed to come from. But let me go to where the people can make sacrifice. We saw that in South Africa when the people wanted change. At the peril of their life, they were moving. And now you're telling me that because somebody's giving you a piece of cassava and so you have to dance to their drums? I don't buy that. But let me go to where why is it not normally the opposition is the government in waiting, right? And if you are setting good examples and show to people that you are the change that they're looking for, I think the opposition should be able to drive that change. Why not the opposition? That's my question, especially the opposition, CPP, to be the driver, to force the president's hand and to be the one to rally the people for the kind of change that we deserve.
Okay, so absolutely, the opposition has a role to play in change. I happen to come from the opposition. I'm with the Liberty Party. Although I must say I'm not representing the Liberty Party here tonight, but I am a member of the Liberty Party and I am from opposition. Absolutely, opposition has a role to play. But when you talk about change, one of the key things or the key ingredients, right? So let's pretend that change we're making is a cake that we're trying to bake, right? And you got all of these ingredients that have to go into the cake mix. One of the key ingredients is like making a cake without butter, right? You're never going to get a cake without butter. It's authority. You have to have authority in order to affect change. Opposition plays the role of a watchdog, plays a role or should play the role of a watchdog, or should play the role of holding the current administration feet to the fire and being the voice of the people and being the voice of change. Absolutely. But opposition does not have the authority to affect change. That authority is vested in the government. That authority is the authority that is given by being elected or appointed to positions in the executive, in the legislature, and in the judiciary. It is the authority that is granted under our Constitution. There is no authority that gives opposition that is given to any opposition, whether you're part of the CPP or any other opposition party. The only authority that opposition have, which I believe that they can definitely use a way more better than is being used right now, is the authority over the individual parties and the actions of the people that are within the party, whether it's the officers, whether it's the lawmakers and whatnot. And this, from my point of view, I believe that this is where the opposition is lagging greatly.
Yeah.
If it were to start with being the change and putting the change out there that they want to see from within the individual parties, we might be on a track to something, right? So there is a certain amount of authority that opposition has that they also are not exercising, right?
Hold on, I'm coming to you, Mr. Gilman. And here is where I'm coming to you, because the change that we saw, let's look at 1979 to 1980. Let's take out the coup, which was, according to those who were championing the change, the coup hijacked what the kind of change that they were looking for. So let's take out the killing part. But the change that gave us multi-party democracy did not start with the government. It started with the people being led by the political parties. So had that change continued, had the coup had not come to hijack it, eventually we're going to have that change being mounted by the opposition through the people.
Well, first of all, let me speak to my brother Sharif here. Let us be crystal clear that the former Associate Justice Kabina Janneh was corrupt, totally corrupt. So let's get that clear. and he was removed justly. I understand the West African court said removing him and his guilt was something else, but it felt that he did not get a fair a jury or whatever, that the process, they have problem with the process. So we get that clear. Now, those who are talking about change, those of us who are talking about change, let me lay out a few things, okay, that you and I have to agree that has become a change. Now, then let's look at the press. The progressive wanted the freedom of the press. Nobody in this room can doubt that Liberia does not have freedom of press now. We were talking about the freedom to assemble, a freedom to choose people of our own constitutional democracy or Republican style. Look in the House, look in the Senate. People are electing people of their own choosing, people that looks like them, people that talk like them. We have that. We talked about women's rights. We talked about these issues in the 70s, the progressive brought these things up. We are looking at women at the table. In fact, we have had the first our first woman president on the entire continent. So anybody who tells you that the progressive or the change of the wind of change that blew from the 70s to the 80s have been retrogressive, like my brother said, the country is in reverse, which I think he's either too young to understand where we are coming from and what has happened. My sister here, as you can see, she is comfortably seated, well eloquent, well educated, understand public policy. She's telling you that despite all of our misgivings, those things that are required to move this country, if we all don't come together collectively, from the judiciary, the legislature, and us, the people, if we don't do that, we are spinning our wheel. Right. We have to collectively agree that yes, education is lacking.
Mr. Gilman,
we have to address that. She admitted, and I admire that.
Mr. Gilman, and no ageism here about someone being too young or too old. You never know. But my question to you is, and I believe too, I want to agree with you on that part, that we have changed, right? We wanted multi-party democracy, we wanted freedom of the press. How we handle it now is a whole different thing. But that has changed in a positive direction. So I'm saying my question to you now is, that change did not start with the Tavares government. It started with the people being led by political parties. So will you agree now that the change that we're looking for should come from the people and the political parties?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And those who are into the politics of governance, this is where we know, and this is where our fault is. Because like my sister is talking about, or Sharif is talking, these things that she is talking about, these are so fundamental to our democracy, but yet and still it requires some understanding. I remember my first graduate class when I was talking to my professor, Michael Dukakis. I asked him, what is the power of this United States Constitution that is so powerful? It's a few pages. And he told me the thing, he said, it is the culture, the community, the culture, and the society that we build that understands and appreciates that democracy to hold it up. In Liberia, we do not have that foundation where 80% of our people can read and write. Not only read and write, even those who are literate, who can read, cannot fully comprehend some of these by reciting Shakespeare and all that does not mean you understand it. This is where we are. So yes, we have taken a quantum leap from where we are to where we are. I have to agree with my brother. Educationally, we are so way behind that for what my sister is talking about to actually take root in Liberia, we have to go back to Martin Luther during the Catholic Reformation. It has to be massive public education from the grassroots up. Other than that, people come and get paid and leave.
Thank you. So we have what we have now. I know, Mr. Sherry, you want to respond to the Kabina Janet thing. I think we can, but we have what we have now.
How do you know that?
The first question, I know that because I saw the body language and this, but we have what we have now. My first question was, where should change come from? But with what we have now, we have George Weah as president. We have Buffer Chambers and Chie in the legislature. We have the court system. In this current state, where would our change come from?
So first, two things. I want to thank Mr. Gaiman for the compliment there. I look very young, but I'm not. And you estimated also that I will be jumping on the Cabina, the Cabina Jana's, the Cabina Jana issue. No, uh, no, not when it's already clear that Cabina Jana was impeached at the will and pleasure of the president of Liberia. We know that his errand boys was sent around to bribe other legislative members. So we know the whole thing, how that went down. But I'm not going to spend much time on that.
Okay.
I do know that what we have now is not enough. This change is not enough. Okay. So how is it that, in the 1940s, the 1950s, the 1960s, I'm just, based on the generality of your question, you talk about change, right? Why do we still have, right? Why do we still have the same motor road from Monrovia to Kepamas? Why do we still have to sit around until the dry season to comfortably travel? And even in the dry season, if you're traveling, you cannot wear any kind of good clothes to travel. So, why do we have all of this?
I just want to remind you of my question that with what we have now, will change come from the change we're looking for? Will it come from number one, George Weah administration? Number two, will this change come from the opposition CPP? Will this change come from the legislature, the judiciary, or the people I'm talking as of today? Practically now, where will our change come from? Not where it should come from, but where should we be expecting some change to come from?
Right. So I will get to that, but the fact that we have all of this going on, okay, tells me that the change that we are expecting is not about to come. Or sadly, it's not about to come. Nothing is about to happen. So sadly, I say that, looking at all the calculus, looking at the very weak opposition, the opposition itself is very weak and debilitated, right? So what is the opposition showing me now that they're a better alternative than what we have? I don't see it. Okay. Don't tell me what you're going to do tomorrow. Show me what you've already done. Show me. Give me a record. Give me something. Show me something. The opposition has not shown me anything, right? So there cannot be a viable alternative if all they're giving me is they're going to replace this guy in the executive mansion. It's going to be the same old, same old. This country, for God's sake, is 174 years old. And this is all we got? Okay, so now you have the collective opposition house, right? Okay, so that's the last thing we wanted. For now, the opposition to sit around and bicker among themselves. And meanwhile, George Weah is going to be traveling the length and breadth of the country collecting support. You saw what happened in Vonjima. You saw when he went to Lufa County. That was, some crowd. So if he continues to do this, if he continues to liaise with, the rural people, if he continues to do some things, all he needs to do is push a few buttons here and there, and he can be easily reelected. So that's where we are. So no, the change that we're waiting for, I'm, here to tell you, I submit to you that we're going to wait for a very, very, very long time for the change that you're talking about. We're going to have to wait. I don't know. I don't have a clear answer as to when this change is going to come based on all of what I've seen so far.
Thank you. Ms. Powell.
Yes.
What will you be looking?
So let me take the various groupings that you put up, and if I were to give advice to each one of those groups, right? First, let's talk about the administration, the current administration. If I were to advise the president, and if the president was serious about change within the next 3 years of his administration, right, I would tell him to get rid of all of the people that are sitting next to him, because they have provided nothing good for him. Whether the problem comes from him, whether the problems comes from anywhere else, the people that are around you are supposed to be the people that guide you. And they have not guided him correctly. So I would tell him to change all of those people, first of all. Let's go to the legislature. I agree with Mohammed that the legislature that we have right now, we can expect nothing good from it. Even the one or two that are in there, and unfortunately, our government is a democracy, and it does require certain majorities to effect change, but the legislature is rotten. So that change in the legislature is going to become the responsibility of the people. 2023 is coming up, right? And the legislature that we have right now, half of them are being changed in 2023. It's going to be up to the Liberian people whether or not to change the legislature. But herein lies a problem there, right? Once again, have we Liberians individually, forget about the CPP, forget about the George Weah administration, forget about political parties, forget about all of that. Have we, as individual Liberians, asked the questions that we need to ask of ourselves? Because you got to ask yourself these questions and have the answers for yourselves before you can even go out to elect someone. The person that is standing in front of you and asking him or her, asking you to elect him or her, is that someone who has a record of having accomplished the things that are important to you? Right? How has that person shown success in doing X, Y, Z? And that X, Y, Z may be different for everybody, right? But it's what's important to you. If what's important to you is being able to ensure that we have a thriving economy, then is that person someone who has a track record of doing that? If what's important to you is to be able to educate your children, is that someone who you see is able to do that? If it's healthcare, if it's agriculture, whatever it is, you have to define what's important to you and then look amongst the candidates that are in front of you and say, is this person the right person? Number one. Number two, outside of the voters, you see, there's a saying that the leadership of a nation will never, ever be greater than the sum of its people, right? And so, as long as, and I know a lot of people that I know would be, you know, kick-ass. I'm sorry, I don't even know if I can say that, but will be very good in the legislature, right? But unfortunately, these people are sitting on the sidelines. And the reason that they're giving is, I ain't want to get involved in the full government thing. They're not serious.
So
and there are reasons.
What I'm hearing from you is change, even though as bleak as it may be, the change will come from the people. That's what I'm hearing from you.
The change, it depends on where you're talking about the change, right? We have 3 more years to go under this administration. The change under this administration in the next 3 years will not come from the people. It will come from the authority, from the people who have the authority vested in them. The people do have a role to play, and that role will be played come 2023, which is what they can partly decide.
The people can demonstrate civil disobedience. They collect
but let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question, right? If you got your children sitting down at home, that you got to worry about where the next meal is coming from. You see, demonstration is sometimes a luxury that not everybody has. Are you really going to be thinking about going? And demonstration is not a one-day thing.
Right.
If you want change through demonstration, it has to be sustained. How many people are able to go sit down and demonstrate for weeks on end? Because that's what's going to be required. So while demonstration is a powerful tool, you must understand the environment within which you're using that tool to understand whether it's an effective tool in this current environment.
Can I chime in real quick?
No, I'm coming to you. You can use that.
Okay.
Say, well,
go ahead.
Even though you may.
I also wanted to finish up because I think as a member of the opposition, I think it's important for me to say this.
Okay, go ahead. Finish up.
Before I'm a member of the opposition, I'm a member of Liberia. So that trumps everything else, right? Opposition needs to come together and forget individual ambitions. Until and unless that happens, they will never and can never be the vehicle for change.
Thank you. Mr. Gilman.
Yes.
From whence cometh our change as of today?
Well, at one point we will go on these shows and we would defend our government, would defend our relatives, would defend our family. But at some point, we have to be like our able Ms. Power just mentioned. We have to look ourselves in the faces and actually speak true to ourselves, not power, because we are the power. I remember when the 2020 election, when it came around, I called a friend of mine. I said, well, we lost the election massively across the country. Change, these guys would make us do things that we don't want to do. And one of those people actually come from my own hometown of Buchanan, which is Dara Dillon. And you know how I feel about that. And we said that. And then to my own chagrin, for me to have heard last week that in February, these people got together and connived and gave themselves $20,000 for something they call for debt. And then they turned around and gave themselves extra. Not only are they giving themselves all this money, but going around the people and changing the nomenclature of the law and saying this particular law hold our feet to the fire, so that the incoming opposition and the host got together and say, well, let's change the rule. They changed it from the budget to what they call legislative engagement. So basically, we are paying them to go to work, and we have to pay them extra to go and engage their own constituents. So from what Ms. Power is saying, it looks like from the legislative point, our people are sending these folks to bring change. But it looks like every time they send them to this place, they all wind up being dirty, because for Dara Dillon, Nyobli Kanga, Matthew Joe, I'm talking about my leaders from Grand Bassa County, to sit there and agree to change the nomenclature of the law to avail themselves wealth under the table. I do not want to be very, very pessimistic, but we got issues. We got serious problems.
So you made changes not coming from the legislature. Where should we be looking?
Listen, we have to actually go back to the drawing board, because it's not working. It's not coming from the legislature. This going election tells me after the CDC was defeated massively with the influx of new folks. For these folks, they met with Edwin Snow and they met in Bombay County, and they had a massive retreat. That change was on the way. For them to turn around and start changing the law, I'm pessimistic, and I think we need to do more than what I'm seeing. There's more to it than meets the eye.
So will the change come from President Weah and his administration?
Well, one of the things that we talked about, and now I'm hearing the opposition say this, is that I think Samuel Tuer said this a while ago. Maybe it's time for us to look at a benevolent dictatorship.
Stop that.
Listen, those who, you are one of those, and those who are talking about Rwanda. Paul Kagame been around for 35 years, and everybody praises what he's doing. He's not a Democrat. He is a dictator. So if that's why people are praising, maybe that's why we need to elaborate. And it doesn't necessarily have to be George Weah, but maybe we need a strong man, like everybody, or a strong woman to take us there. But for what I'm seeing now,
and I totally reject that with my 5 senses. But ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia on Tough Talking Thursday, and we are discussing change in Liberia. What does change look like, and where is it going to come from? Is it from the Weah administration, the opposition CPP, the legislature, somebody called them legislature, the judiciary, or the people? My panelists, we have Ms. Weah Power, who's joining us from Monrovia, Mr. Mohammed Sharif, a native of Kalipo Kamweken Waplo Institute, and the unabashed sedition, unapologetic, Mr. Jerome Gilman. Please, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to read your comments and we will engage our panelists a little more to give us some meat, to talk tough. Because you see, change is not going to come when we play softball. We'll be right back.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Ja.
And I'm right here bringing it to you on Tough Talking Thursday. Let's get some views from our audience. Laurel Heron said, change starts with the mind. The mind of the people has to change. And she's continued to say, is all hands on deck. Kude Williams say, is Jerome versus Wade and Mohammed, I think. Wisdom, kindness, change involves fundamental transformation of the way people do things. We need also a standard mechanism to measure progress in order to guide positive change. Basiki Konen, Weah's administration promised change. 3 years on, has it produced the change it promised? I'm not sure about that. The legislature, made up of various political parties, can hardly agree on anything. They behave more like faction leaders of the war days. The only thing they agree on is to distribute free money among themselves. Other than criticism of the government, we have not seen any concrete agenda for change from the CPP. What are the approaches of CPP on healthcare, road construction, etc., etc.? Then Martin Brown said, Dennis, from what perspective are we looking at change, or from which angle are we identifying change? Is it from government angle, or is change from the holistic point of view? And you can tell us. I have my own ideas, but try. Aliu, somebody's trying to be funny here. He thinks I'm not able to bake a cake. Tell Dennis, my lady, he needs to learn how to bake a cake. Well, if I can bake a cake, I'm sure I can cook palm butter. That I can guarantee. Mayeda Gia say all these Liberian people are more Americans than the Americans. I swear, this speaking series business, that is why we are in the big mess. Be yourself for once, Liberians. And I put that up because it's hard, sometimes whatever you do, people say, well, you're speaking series, oh, you're speaking broken English. So what are we going to do now? Jackie Sire said, to trivialize an issue is beneath the discussion. Proper English is now being equated to what? This is the same reasoning that got us in this situation. So when we speak English, Martin said, Gaiman is sad that the people are not, it is so sad that the people are not in control of the government process, because right after election, they have absolutely no voice. So how will the change come about? Jackie is also saying the opposition must come up with alternatives to the educational system, the security environment, the budget, ways to curb corruption, etc. We need alternatives, and the opposition needs to show us these alternative routes. Let me read our last comment here. Okay. Benevolent dictatorship in a nation with a culture of leaders who set themselves above the law and promote impunity is dangerous, Mr. Gaiman. I'm adding that one. We need leadership by example, and by that, a good example. We need transformative, results-oriented citizens to take leadership. We need people who have lived it in their private lives and the private sector. All right, those are some of the comments. And Wade, before you come in, my question here is, many people talk about this mind change. I was preparing for the show, and I decided to ask people, right? And one person told me change starts in the home. We need to change ourselves in the home, the way we do things, change in the church, in the mosque, at the playground. So if these things not change, because the citizen, the family unit, right, start from there. So if you have corrupt people in the household, it's going to go to the government, it's going to go in the churches, it's going to go everywhere. So change we talk about is not going to come unless we start from the basic, and that's the family unit. What's your take, Wade?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. I mean, we have gone as a nation so far away from whether it's traditional values or cultural. I remember when I was growing up, and I was a troublesome little child.
No way.
And I remember, yes, when I was growing up, that my mother worked and usually came home around 5:30 in the evenings. However, the parents in the neighborhoods all have responsibility for all of the children in the neighborhoods. And I would be afraid to do things, not because my mom were around, but because I knew somebody in the neighborhood was either going to call me and whip my behind, and then report me to my mom when she came home, and she would then whip my behind a second time, right? We've lost a lot. The civil crisis stripped our country. And so we have to start getting back to what we studied in school, for example, what we practiced many years ago, this thing called the moral fabric of the society, which is the family unit. We don't have that anymore. And it's really contributing to the situation that we find ourselves in right now. But before I go on, I want to, the last comments you made, read from, I think it was L.I.B. Bitu.
Yeah.
L.I.B. Bitu, yeah? And if you could just pull that back up, because I think that is when you start to ask the question of where will the change come from, I think, well, the second part of his answer is really important. We need leadership by example, and by that, a good example. We need transformative, results-oriented citizens to take leadership. We need people who have lived it in their private lives in the private sector. This, for me, is very important. And if I were to leave this interview with one message to the Liberian people, this is the message that I would send to them. Stop electing leaders that look like you, or that they're from your neighborhood, or that they're from the same tribe you're from, or that you related to them. If those continuously are the criteria upon which you elect your leaders, you will continue to get what you have now. Instead, start electing leaders based on their track record. What have they done positively to impact? Those are the questions that you need to ask the next time you go to the poll. Don't vote for somebody simply because they're from your political party, or because they're your cousin, or because you're from the same tribe. What has that person done to show that when they get there, they will actually do the same?
Thank you. And still on that question of starting from home, Jackie Sayer made a comment here, and Mr. Sharif, I'm coming to you. She said the moral core of the country has been destroyed. The older citizens have abdicated their duty to nurture values in the young. And because we always get this question, the family, we got to start from the home, change our mindset and all that. And we know our family or the structure or the culture is some of it is not all that great, right? Sometimes, and I'm coming to you because we talk. You come from a very neat family. The Mandingo background, very strong culture, family values, and all that. But it also comes with a problem where you are in position and your family come to you and say, "Well, this is your chance. While you are there, they're not telling you to steal, but in essence, what they're saying, get what you can get to benefit us." So this whole idea of family value sometimes is not all that true. Number two, we have seen other places. I mean, in America here, we don't have to. I mean, laws are made regardless of how we feel, or what we believe in as a family, or whether we are Christian or Muslim or what have you, right? The laws are made regardless. So why is it when it comes to us, and then we are talking about, okay, we need to maybe respect one another, respect the old people before the country goes right? Mr. Sharif.
It's my turn. Okay, so One of the, I like to look back at these comments that are made and, and incorporate that into my answers.
Sure.
One of the commenters talked about, the kind of English been spoken, and that is somehow, the reason why we have some of the problems that we have now. Well, you know what? I do not apologize, okay, for that. And I think that people need to understand that, um, speaking better, writing better English are essential requirements, right, for today's world. You go to an interview, okay, I mean, you know, these things are going to come out. When I was at the University of Liberia, one of the teachers told us in class that a junior student at LU went to his office and asked him to write her letter of application. That was back then when we still wrote letters of application. We still carry manila folders around, these ministries. So at the time he commented, he said, this is a shame. So speaking better English, writing better English are, some of the requirements for me. When you talk about, the values that you talk about, I remember my uncle taking us to Waplo Institute. So one of the things my uncle told the principal when we were registered was four of us. It was me, my cousin. It was me and my cousins basically. My cousin, older cousin was, he was older than Isa was older than all of us, and I was next to Isa, and then there was the other two cousins who were younger. So the teacher, my uncle told the principal that these are my children. They are also your children. So if they misbehave, you can basically spank them. You know what I mean? You can't spank them. They are your children. But just what I'm going to tell you now, just don't kill them. So that's how we started. That was how we started. You say that today and people say, wow, this is abuse and this and that and the other. But looking back now, I'm thankful that my uncle was able to imbue that into us, right? So we went to school very humble. One time I got in trouble, I came home, I couldn't tell my uncle. The teacher came home to look for me, at home to look for me. But I hate myself, right? And when my uncle found out, he said, you can't do that. And so I was, verbally reprimanded. He had to go back to the teacher to apologize. So it is the kind of culture that we came from. And one of the things that I also want to say is that, there's that pressure that you mentioned on, some of us. And, the moment you start to become somebody, so you're out of school and you become somebody. And now becoming somebody, what does that mean? That means, you're holding down a job. In some instances, a good job. In some instances, it doesn't have to be a well-paying job. You're going to have family members coming over asking you, hey, you've been doing this now you've been working around now for like a year, 6 months or a year. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're the Deputy Minister of Finance. What are you doing? Your friends are building, you know, I just saw the guy who worked with you here, he's your security guard. And now he has a house in Gardnersville. Or this other one has a house in Pennsville. So what are you doing? So now you have that pressure from your own people, basically, right? Encouraging you to do something, encouraging you to do something about yourself. And what they're encouraging you to do there is, in some instances for me, I don't think it's legal, really, because, if I'm sitting here, just waiting for a paycheck to do the right thing. Now, in order for me to have the kind of building that you're talking about, to get all these cars that you're talking about, where do you think I'm supposed to get, the resources from to be able to acquire all those properties, right? And this is the kind of pressure, not just on me as a Mandingo person, but it also goes around to, other, people in other ethnic groups, I think, in other backgrounds, right? And it's one of the things that we're not even looking at. We're not even talking about that a lot. we tend to look at government officials a lot. Well, the government did this, the government did that, which is fair. But when you look within yourself, right, you also have, a build up to this kind of, this kind of attitude. So it starts from, some of them starts from the family, right? If Weah wasn't doing what he's doing, you don't think his family members will go tell him, you see, this is what Torbo did, this is what Topman did, this is what Doe did. So what are you doing? So now you have the inclination to now to start something, to do something. And once you start something, you're never going to end.
You are muted.
Mr. Goodman, let's get to the comments and your response.
Well, first of all, for those of us who have been in the vanguard for a while, I think we all are. We are students of Liberian history, the Liberian culture. Liberia is actually a deceptive nation from the foundation. Let's look at some of the things that actually got us to where we are. First, we talk about unification. I think you have to give the late Bronsky some credit where he said during the Chancellor regime, when he said, for us, we have a chance to reset, to recalibrate, to set the foundation of this country. And let's start with the judicial system. The dual judicial system in Liberia is terrible. We have a law, we have a system that is called traditional justice, where when a crime is committed beyond Monrovia, the tribal folks have their own judicial system. So here we are. We have a system, we have a country in which we live, where if Ms. Powell went to Grangida or went to Pasadena, whatever happens to her there is now transferable, cannot be translated into our legal constitutional democracy in Monrovia. It's a terrible, terrible arrangement that needs to be addressed. We have never addressed that. So here we are. Somebody was killed in Nima the last time, and the police went to investigate, and they put the devil outside, and they beat the police almost to death. Okay, you see these things? They are saying we have a judicial system that is totally separate from what is going on constitutional democracy in Monrovia. We have that. Nobody has addressed that. Now the opposition, now the present government, everybody goes on their merry way, and the country is not together. Now let's look at the Christian versus Muslim kind of thing. We are liberal in the Christian sense that our Christian women and men will marry anybody. But when you get to our Islamic brothers and sisters, they are saying, we can marry your daughters. It is our religious law, but you cannot marry within our family. So it's a one-way street. And that conversation, it is there. We have not discussed it. And people know this is the main problem of this. We don't want Islamic laws in our country. Because here you are marrying all my Bassa sisters and Bassa girls, but you are saying no Bassa man has the right to marry a Mandingo or Islamic woman because it's the Sharia law. These things are there. So now here we are, we have this fundamental system about poverty. Even the United Nations and ECOWAS, they address that in the Accra Accord, that when elections are held, there is so much poverty and the distribution of wealth in Liberia have been so terrible that within the law, they enshrine in the law that there has to be housing allowances for folks coming from Kawikan, from Baywing, from all of that. When they come to the city, they got nowhere to live, they are poor. So we have to have allowances in there for them. I have two friends that were elected from Grand Bassa County. When they came into Monroe, they lived with Edwin Snow until they could get on their feet. And what did they do when Edwin Snow wanted to be speaker? They pay him back by electing him. So the Constitution has addressed that. We have recognized that there is a ill distribution of wealth in this country that has affected everybody, or 90% of the folks. So when we're talking about justice, transformative justice, we are talking about transformation of the country. It's not only about election, like Ms. Powell was saying. There are deep-rooted issues that we have to address. Until we address that, I'm only going there to get paid. She's only going to get paid, and then she leaves. And the last piece before I close is the indictment of us who consider ourselves educated in the West and knows it all. What have we done since we've been running the country from 1847? We go, we collect, we harvest, we bring our wealth back to Maryland, Florida, where I am, everywhere else, and buy a home and forget it. Look at Ellie Johnson, Salif government, all those that work, quality people that work there. How many of those people now living in Liberia besides maybe Miss Powell? Everybody is back here living, and the farm is empty. People are.
I never worked in Ellen government. Oh. Let's correct that.
No, I'm saying those are us because I support
government.
That's correct. I understand what I'm talking about. Those are us who are from the West, who goes there. We are all indicted that we have not done. So you go, they say, oh, they had to go again. Oh, yeah, then I come back again with a PhD and a master. I went to Bassa, and my folk from Bassa didn't even want to see me because, yeah, they don't come back again. They come in here to do this, do that. So, Mr. Ja, in a short, in a nutshell, we have more to do than just electing folks.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. We have so much to cover, so much ground to cover in this, on the subject matter of change. Where will it come from? Let me get your closing statement on where will this change come from and where do we go from here. But before we do that, let me get, every time Tabata takes place in Liberia. So we come to this segment for you to identify one Tabata. But before you do that, let's get your final comments on where do we go from here. You have 1 minute, 30 seconds each. Our next step, where do we go? If the change is not coming from the president or it's not coming from the people, what do we do? Mr. Sherry, let me start with you.
It's unfortunate that now I have to dedicate a bigger portion of my 1 minute and 30 seconds to something Jerome said about marriage. This issue has been prosecuted a lot, and tens of thousands of my people have been persecuted for this. People have died for the kind of statement that he's making now. It's irresponsible. It's insensitive. These are the things that, the war that Charles Taylor brought was based on the fact that, Mandingos were not, they were people who didn't allow us to marry their daughters, and here they are, they're marrying our daughters. So what did, the rebels, when they invaded these towns, they took, Mandingo women, raped Mandingo women, killed Mandingo women. So these are very touchy subjects. And I'm glad you brought it up. But one thing you have to understand is that love is not forced, not coerced, right? So I'm sure right now in Liberia, the issues that you are talking about, I have seen a lot of Mandingo women or Muslim women, not just Mandingos. So Mandingos are not the only Muslims in Liberia. You have Weah, you have Gola, you have Bandi, and different tribes are intermarried. But somehow this issue cannot go away. I don't expect it to go away, but we have to be very careful. When you talk about Sharia law, right? That's why we don't want to bring Sharia law. You are very wrong, because in Sierra Leone has a large percentage of Muslim population. They coexist. Guinea has, where Mr. Ja lived and I lived for some time, Guinea has about 70 to 80% Muslim population. All Christian holidays are observed in Guinea, right? Friday, Sunday, okay, these days are observed in Guinea. Easter, Christmas, these are observed in Guinea. Guinea doesn't have a Sharia law. Guinea has a majority Muslim population, but both the Muslims and Christians have this level of tolerance. So we have to be very careful. When it comes to Liberia, it's a touchy subject, and some of the compatriots, have sufficiently talk about these issues, but they talk about it in a way that is very incendiary. They talk about it in a way that create this issue of discord among the different ethnicities. So we have to be very careful in what we say and what we do.
Now your closing statement on where we go from here.
And so where we go from here is that collectively as a people, right? You mentioned South Africa, where it was the people responsible for change, they forced change. A violent guerrilla struggle that was supported by many African countries, including our own Liberia, right? But somehow in Liberia is different, right? So the the critical actor of change has to come from the executive leadership. There has to be executive leadership. Some years ago, just real quick, this is several decades ago, President Tolbert, from what my father told me, I noticed that, Mandingo people were not inclined to send their children to school, both boys and girls. So what Tolbert did was he went around the country to encourage Mandingo people to send their kids to school, right? So a lot of Mandingo brothers and sisters started to go to school because they said the president said so, right? The president talked to their parents. The president said it is important that you send your kids to school. So presidential leadership is so important. I bring that up to say that presidential leadership is very critical in the change process.
So for 15 seconds, if the change is not coming from the presidential leadership, what do we do?
If the change does not come from the presidential leadership, then we are stuck in neutral, as it is in Liberia. We are stuck in neutral, right? And real quick. So the president, George Weah, to his credit, introduced legislation. That's changing. You talk about change. Push legislation to reduce the presidential term of office, to reduce the term of office for senators and representatives. What did the Liberian people do? What did the opposition do? They voted against this change. Right. That's a change. So why did they vote against it? I don't know.
Thank you. Let's go to Wade. Where do we go from here, Wade?
That's a loaded question. I think I will agree with Mohammed that right now we're in neutral. As a matter of fact, I would even go as far as to say the car has started going in reverse. I'm not hopeful about any real change within the next several years in Liberia because the people who have the authority to implement that change have not shown that that they are willing to implement the change. You never know tomorrow, but as of today, I do not have faith in the people, either elected or appointed, who have the authority to start championing change. My hope for change in Liberia actually lies more in the people, and which is why some of what I've been doing is trying to reach out to people and try to educate people on what it is, what their responsibility is in change in our country, in national development. There's a saying that when you point your finger at someone, always remember that 4 fingers are pointing back at you. So for me, I always believe that change begins with the individual, real transformative change that begins with the individual. And I would say that people who are really interested in transformative change need to start reaching out to individuals and speaking with individuals and educating individuals and have sort of like a pyramid effect that can go down and stop this business of talking about change from a political party perspective. Political parties have absolutely nothing to offer you when it comes to true change in this country. And if we don't stop looking at it through those lenses, the lenses are always going to remain blurred. The second thing that I would suggest to the powers that be is if you don't include people from outside of the CDC, you're never going to get anywhere, and you're going to continue to fail at everything that you're failing at because you do not have the people on board, right? CDC is not Liberia. CPP is not Liberia. So until politicians start learning that they're going to have to work together if they really truly mean well for this country, we can hang it up. Again, the champion of change in any country is the president.
Thank you. The unabashed sedition.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Giles, and my able friends and colleagues, Ms. Powell and Mr. Sharif. Real quick, when I made my remark, you didn't hear that I mentioned a tribe. I never said Mandingo. I think you injected that as an Islamic. So let's get that clear. When you talk about Mandingo, you are talking about subset. We are talking about Islamic. We are talking about the governing structure and the laws that govern that. And I know you never debunked the fact that it is part of the law. But now let's go to.
But it's not true, though. It's not
okay,
true.
Okay, that's fine. That's for another day.
You go to
That's
Sierra
another.
Leone. Have
Hold
you
on,
traveled
hold
to
on,
Sierra Leone?
hold on,
Have you
Mohammed.
traveled to
That's
Guinea?
fine. Let's leave that. That's another topic. But let's go to my closing statement here about the CDC, and I want to bring this home a little bit, so we can look at when I was growing up in Bassa, and I think Sharif and you also can attest to that. My first wife is the niece of former Associate Justice Banks. When I met her, I was at the University of New Jersey, and I asked her whether she'd ever been to Bassa. And honestly, she told me, you know what? I grew up in there for 18 years. I never went to Bassa, never left Monrovia. I met a gentleman by the name of Harrison Jadia from Sino. He asked me, have you been to Sino or Grand Jita? And I said, well, I lived all my life in Buchanan, never been to Grand Jita, never been to Sino. So I'm saying this to say, when President Weah was putting together his policy book, one of the things that everybody, that was a consensus, is we have to unite our people. And the movement of our people is very key. Hence, the road connectivity we're talking about. So it is critical that we connect our folks. And I think President Weah has begun to do that. And we have to collectively work towards connecting our counties, our cities,
So
our
going
villages. Now, let's go to education. For those of us who are talking about massive public education, it is the only panacea to what we are talking about. I think President Weah has it right when he says no child should be barred from going to school because he or she cannot pay WIAT fee.
Thank
And
you.
all of those things. Now, let's go to
let's stop there. Let's get our last segment in.
Yeah, let's talk about healthcare.
Yeah.
So the president is talking about sending, for the first time in the history of our country, sending doctors abroad to specialize in
Mr. Gamer, sorry to interrupt you.
So here we are. You are talking about who is
No, I was talking about where we go from here, and you are
This is what I'm telling you. Our path to where we are going have begun. And President George, we have started that, and the road have been built, hospitals have been built, doctors have been sent for specialization, education has been given, and those are the foundation that we will need, and hail to President Weah.
Thank you. Our last segment is the Tabata of the week that you notice. There is always some Tabata going on in Liberia, and we can't deny it. And that's why we began with the song, I Don't Need Your Tabata. So there are some people who Tabata you don't need, and we need to spell it out. Mr. Gaiman, what's the you want to talk about?
The greatest Tabata, the greatest small screen I have ever seen in Liberian politics is the changing of the nomenclature of the legislature to give themselves money without putting it in the budget and without them thinking that the Liberian people will find out. That is the greatest scam I've ever seen in Liberian politics.
Ms. Powell.
I think I gotta agree with Jerome on that, but I think right along with that is the legislators actually accepting this money and telling the Liberian people that they're going to do their projects for them in the counties and we know very well that that's not what's going to happen. So that's the huge tabata that we're dealing with right now.
Mr. Sharif.
My tabata, wow, I could go everywhere with this, but I like to focus on something that has been going on for a long time, and that is that our leaders, right, our president, vice presidents are carrying the title of PhD, doctor, honorary doctors, and they actually, this is required now, where, is Dr. George Weah. Come on. Okay, and then Joel Howard Taylor also is a doctor. These are honorary doctors. It didn't start with them, though. William R. Tolbert, right? I didn't know William R. Tolbert didn't have a PhD. He didn't have a PhD. He was very well educated, right? But still, he didn't have a PhD. That was honorary doctor. And then you come to Samuel Doe. Samuel Doe was Dr. Samuel Iron Doe. So stop with it, okay? If you love this doctorate degree so much, go to the classroom, earn this, and this thing is earned. So we're not, Joel Howard Taylor is a doctor. Dr. Joel Howard Taylor. George Weah is doctor. That's a big tabata. It's nonsense. Stop it.
and I like that one. The tabata I see is also along the lines of the 30,000. The tabata there is Liberian people not being able, because this thing was in the budget. We discussed the budget. It's like nobody looking at it, so we don't say anything until it hits our face. That's Tabata. We need to start paying attention. I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the show tonight. This is Tough Talking Thursday, and this is where we talk tough. And we'll continue tomorrow. Tomorrow we have some great shows lined up for you that I want to mention here. Tomorrow we have our literary hour, The Making of the Republic. That's the second Exodus. Last week, they spoke about the coming of the people from the disintegrated empires coming to Liberia. Now we have the second Exodus, and I think that will be the free people from the West coming to Liberia. Also, tomorrow we're going to be speaking with Dr. Dugba Chris Yang. Dr. Yang has written the legislature. He's written the president that he wants to help with COVID-19. That, why are you writing? Why can't you just go and help? He said he's been writing and nobody is paying him mind. He's going to come here and we're going to be talking about it Friday at 1 p.m. I want to thank you again for your time. Continue to tune in, ladies and gentlemen, to Focus on Liberia. This is where we discuss the real stuff. Forget the fluff, forget the noise. Come and listen. Focus on Liberia. We educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We want to thank all our people for watching, and even those who are going to watch later. On behalf of all of us here at Focus on Liberia, my name is Dennis Jack, closing up with the song that says, we are all Liberians. Whether you believe the change is coming from the president or not, whether you believe he has already achieved what no other president has achieved in 50 years or not, whether you believe the change is coming from the opposition, CPP, or the people, we are all Liberians, and we must do our best to make Liberia that glorious land of liberty. Good night and goodbye.
We are Liberia. Liberia is our home.